Hello and welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to draw a portrait in black and white. And I'm going to be using a reference photo for this drawing. Make sure you pick a photo that you have copyrights to it or it has some significant value to you. For example, here's a photo that I'm going to be using. This is the photo of my grandparents, and I've been wanting to draw their portraits for a very long time, and I think this is great that I'm making this video so I can finally try and draw their portraits. So I'm going to pick my grandma because I don't want a face that is tilted like my grandpa here. And this is for beginner learners, so I'm going to go ahead with a face that is more straightforward and you can see the full face and not a semi-profile. I'm going to be using soft pastels for this drawing, and I will be using mainly just black and white pastel. You can also use graphite pencil if you want to complete this project. We'll be mostly working with softer pencils like B2, B6 and the HB pencil. But if you're going to be using the soft pastels, make sure that you have this Fabriano or Tiziano paper, which has a little bit of tooth, and I have chosen this brown paper. You can also choose a paper that is gray or like grayish green for this drawing. And the reason why is that it's going to capture light much better when your background already has some sort of neutral color to begin with. If you also have like a gray pastel, that's also great. You can also do this in monochromatic style, which means you can do it in one color only. For example, if you're going to be doing it in blue, you're going to have your darkest blue, something mid-tone, and then the lightest blue. So if you have a light blue and a dark blue, and then you can choose black to darken it, and white. So before you get started with this assignment or project, it's also good if you do some exercises on drawing a skull, so you can have a better understanding of what's the structure underneath the face. That way, when you are trying to draw a portrait, it's going to become much easier to know how to distribute the contrast, the light and shadows, and the tissue of the different parts of the face. Try drawing a skull using a skull even from the Halloween costumes and Halloween decorations. That still gives you some sort of idea. So photos like these and drawings like these ones are a great way to exercise a little bit and getting some practice before you get started with this project. Let's get started. I want you to draw a frame around your reference photo. So we're going to be drawing some guidelines that would help us to make our drawing easier in terms of proportions and how we want to get started. We will get started with drawing a symmetrical line, just going right from the center of our drawing. It doesn't have to be a perfect line. So I'm not going to apply too much pressure when I'm just getting started. These are just guidelines. And next, what you want to do is defining how much space do you want to have from the top and from the bottom, where the head is going to exactly end. I'm just going to put this line because I don't want the head to be any higher. This is including with the hair. And then I want to also know how much space I want to have from the bottom of my drawing. So let's say I want to end somewhere around here, so then I will have some space for the neck and the shoulders. So that's how much we want to consider for this drawing. So based on that, this is how tall is my face. Now, there are many different techniques that you can draw a portrait. The technique that I'm going to be using, I'm going to call it the nose method. In the nose method, we're going to be using the nose as a measuring guide to compare all the different proportions on the face. Now, there are different ways. Some people start with a circle on the top portion of the face and then connect everything from that circle, but I find the nose method is the simplest way of doing it. So in the nose method, if you look at your reference photo and most faces, the nose is almost 1/3 of the height of the face. So based on that, looking at my grandma's photo, her nose is also almost 1/3 of her face. I'm going to divide this length into almost equal 3 sections. If this is difficult for you to do it by eye, you can use your pencil, measure 1/3 and see if it actually is true or not. Then next, we're going to be using the eyes as the measuring guide. So the width of our face is around 5 eyes. We should be able to fit 5 eyes within our face, like across from one end to the other end. When we are looking straight forward, we can fit 1 eye between the 2 eyes, half of an eye on each side of each eyes. So let's say here's the middle of my face, and I'm going to create 1 eye here. I take this measure and I'm going to add 1 more eye on this side and another eye on the other side, and then half of an eye on each side from here. If you can do this measurements by eye, go for it, do it. This is always great way of practicing your observational skills. And if you noticed, I started the nose right from the first third of the face. And so this one that was on the top, that was where the eyes are almost falling. We can again figure this out and check it later with our reference photo. Some people's eyes might be a little bit lower, some are slightly higher, but overall it's somewhere on this line. The second 1/3 portion is going to be where the nose ends. So this is the bottom of our nose. For figuring out the width of your nose, you can draw a line perpendicular from the corner of your eye all the way down to this line, and this is going to be how wide your nose is going to be. Most noses are following this rule. And then there is a tiny bit of nose that is slightly lower. The space that is between the third of our face, halfway through, so if I'm going to measure this halfway through, this is going to be somewhere around here. This is going to be where our mouth falls. This is literally the middle of our mouth. So for the mouth, if you draw a line right from the center of your eye, just straight perpendicular down, is going to be the width of your mouth. And the rest is going to be your chin. Wrinkly skin, then there will be some other layers that I will have to add later. Sometimes people's chin could be slightly taller, so based on where the lip line is, the chin might be slightly lower. Again, it also depends on how they're looking. If they're looking slightly down, the chin might seem slightly taller than when they're looking straight forward. Next, I'm going to connect all these dots together and make the overall form of the face. So now pay attention to the overall form of the face that you are drawing. Is the face more rounded? Is it more square shape? Is it more diamond shape, pear shape, more oval? So pay attention to the overall form and try to connect these dots together. Keep playing around with it. Don't worry if you need to go over the lines and fix anything. You may absolutely fix things as you go. Okay, and now I'm going to define the shape of the eye here. And the eyes almost end somewhere around here. Again, pay attention to how wide your eyes are from each side. Most eyes have this almond shape form, so I'm not going to draw the almond right away, but I'm going to break it down into the simplest geometric form that I can define it in. So I'm just going to keep it very hard edge. Now that I have the form, I can actually pay more attention to the shape of her eye. So again, since she's older, there is a little bit of her eyelid is covering her eye. And I'm using this white pastel just so it is more visible for the video. You can start with your black if you want. It doesn't matter, you just need to keep the lines very light and don't put too much pressure on your medium at this point. Now I can see where her eyebrows are based on where her eyes are. If there's too much distance, then it's going to be up high around here, but her eyebrows are pretty close to her eyes. I'm just going to, again, simplify it as much as possible. I'm not going to draw her entire, like each eyebrow like hair literally, but just a line to show the overall form and where it starts and ends and what is the proportion and space, the negative space that is around her eye. Next, I'm going to work on defining the form of the nose. Like the bottom of most noses looks like a top of a heart shape. So I'm just gonna mimic that form. Again, we can simplify it as much as possible. Break it down into like angular shape. So then you can go around it and add more details. So the nose hole on this side is more visible, on the other side is slightly visible. I'm just going to connect these dots again. This side, because of this shadow that is falling, you can see this line. On this side, not so much, but I'm just gonna start it from the top. Something that you can do is drawing a circle, show how big is the tip of the nose, and then everything will be connected eventually. Next, I'm going to work on the lips and the space between the upper lip and the bottom of the nose. Now, looking at my reference photo, I think this is how much space is. Again, by eye, you can use your pencil and compare it, on your reference photo. Most lips, the upper lip looks like the top of a heart shape again. Sometimes flatter, sometimes a little more defined form, or two kind of mountains merging inside each other. The eyeballs are usually taking almost 2/3 of the width of the eye. We connect it to our lips, so my upper lip is not as wide, it's actually quite thin. And so the first line that I had is almost now defining the bottom lip, which is great. I don't have to erase it, I'll just use it and connect everything together. I'm going to just add her neck so the head is not floating somewhere. Pay attention to where the neckline starts. Is it from here? Is it from lower end of where the chin is? And then I also will double check everything too, like is the chin height is true based on the reference photo, or do I need to change it? And I'm going to ignore all the wrinkles for now. And I will maybe add her shirt. And again, you want to pay attention to this space as well based on your reference photo. Do you need to increase it, or is this enough? And she has this kind of headscarf she's wearing. It's kind of covering almost her entire shoulder. So I'm going to add her hair. I have some more space here. I think at the beginning I said that we're going to keep this point with hair included, but now I see that I do need this much space for my forehead, so I'm going to keep it and we'll add the hair on top of it. And pay attention to how much space the hair is taking, and compare it to your reference photo and make sure that it is true. And she has a little bit of wavy hair, so I'm going to try to replicate that here. And the rest is just her headscarf. Alright, before we move on to our next stage, which is adding light and shadows, I just wanted to remind you that if you choose a reference photo that has a head that is tilted, like my grandpa, make sure that the lines that you're drawing are all following the direction of the tilted head. For example, if the eyes are tilted, this line will be tilted. Even on this photograph with my grandma, her eyes are slightly tilted this way, so I will be kind of fixing this as I go. But for now, for the next step, what we want to do is identifying where the light falls. So light usually falls on everything that is sticking out and that is convex. That is our forehead, the tip of the nose, a little bit on the lips, on the chin. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my white pastel to cover all those areas. And as I'm applying the medium, I also want to be mindful of the form, of the shape of that area of the face when I'm applying. For example, if I'm applying light to the cheeks, I'm not going to go and do a cross hatching like this. It's going to be kind of almost against the form that is there. It's a spherical form on the cheek and it's a very organic form, so I'm gonna try to kind of mimic that as I'm applying this light. So as you can see, I'm using the wider side of my pastel here to get kind of even coverage as best as possible. For areas that is rounded, I'm just going to add a more rounded form. If you're using graphite pencil, then for this part you also need to make sure that you remain very patient as you're applying your light and shadows. There's not going to be that much of light applying, that's just going to be the whiteness of the paper, but for the shadows you will be applying some cross hatching with your pencil. So on this reference photo, I see that my grandma's face is quite light actually. And there's quite a bit of light even on her neck, so I'm going to cover that as well. Remember that if there is any facial expression on the face, you're going to add it as you are applying more layers. So here there's a little bit of laugh lines. She probably does have a very mild smile here, so I'm going to try and replicate that. If it's a bigger smile, then you just follow the rule of smile emoji, so your laugh handles are going to go slightly higher. I'm going to add a little bit of white inside the eyes as well. Next, I'm going to apply my shadows. So everything that is dark, I'm just going to cover it with black. Again, I'm not going to apply too much pressure at this point. I'm just going to kind of take it very slowly and add a little bit of shadow as I go, and we'll make things darker as we add more layers. But for areas, for example, if the hair are very obvious that is dark, if the shirt is obviously black, you can just cover it. So the shadows are usually found everywhere that light is not falling, and that's usually underneath the things where the objects are sitting. That's everywhere that is hollow and empty inside, so the nose holes and the ear holes, under the chin, those are the areas that attract the most shadow. I just added some of this pattern that is on her dress. Also adding her hair. So for the hair, at this point, I'm just going to cover it as much as possible, but since there's not so much of a hair here, I'm going to draw it instead of just covering it. For the hair, you want to make sure that you draw the hair from its root and not just starting from wherever. See, I just continue this line. Now I'm just going to slightly define the shape of her eyes as well, so I'm getting into a little bit of more details and defining the form here. So next I'm going to start blending some of these light and shadows that I have added. I'm just going to use my fingers here, but you're more than welcome to use your blending tools if you want for this. And this will create a more natural look and also smoother transition from light to shadows and the skin tones here. If you're using graphite pencil, the same technique applies. You have to start blending slightly once you have applied your light and shadows. So this way you can actually define the shape as you are adding more layers as well. Try to not mix the light and shadows together right away, meaning blend the white with a clean blending tool and black with a blending tool for black, unless you know that you need to have a more grayer area, so you can just blend them together. And of course, also pay attention to your background and everything else that is around the face that defines the shape of the face by being the negative space around it, and apply either black or white to that area as well. For me, in my reference photo, the background is very light, it's almost white, so I'm going to be covering my background with white mostly. Once you start blending, you also will notice that how much more layers you need to apply to actually get it to the right value for that area. For example, if this headscarf is much darker, so I will need to apply maybe 2 more layers